Center for Spiritual Living, great to Baltimore, Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson, has frequently been referred to as a Renaissance man. One look at his resume and the reason becomes clear. As a lifelong learner with a passion for self-development, personal transformation, transmutation, and self-awakening, he lives his bliss as a teacher, mentor, speaker, minister, and so much more. His mission is to live, move, and be an active, which is an acronym, authentic, compassionate, transparent, inspired, vibrant, and empowered member of society who serves to educate, elucidate, emancipate, awaken, and empower people and communities. Rev, the floor is yours.
Wow. There are days where never mind. I'm not.
There are days.
Please let the professionals sing. That's why we have Alma today. Thank you, Tracy. So let's jump right on in, folks, because we're talking about something today that's going to, as Tracy would say, and Renee has said before, I don't know if she's on today, but a couple of people have said before that, sometimes the message steps on folks' toes. And today is going to be one because I stepped on my own toes writing this today. So let's jump in. This too is God, the sacred, the mundane, and the profane, the holy, the non-holy, and the unholy. Humans have so many, let us repeat that. Humans have so many taboo topics that many of us will not touch. And yet each of these must also be God, right? No matter the political affiliation, the sociological, cultural experiences, religious, spiritual paths, also all God, right? Wow. What could shift if we embraced and communicated courageously, openly, and vulnerably about all these things that many of us tend to avoid? So let's jump in. The mundane. What does it mean for things to be mundane? Well, we have temporal. Those things that are of the body only, the commonplace, the same old, business as usual. Some would even say mundane could be considered boring. Then you have the profane, that which is vulgar, that which is secular, meaning not holy, that which is blasphemous. Yeah, that's a word that I've been referred to many times over the years. But once again, now, sacred, something that is holy, something that is blessed, something that is spiritual. Pause, because that one word, spiritual, if spirit is all there is, that which is God is all there is, then everything must be spiritual. Meaning there is no spiritual separate from human. There is no spiritual job, minister, monk, nun, priest, that is different from firefighter, politician, teacher. Well, this job is more holy. It's more spiritual. Really? Ernest Holmes says in The Science of Mind, our belief sets the limit to our demonstration of a principle which of itself is without limit. Let's read that again. Our belief sets the limit. So our belief sets the limit on principle because of itself, principle has God has no limit. It is ready to fill everything because it is infinite. It is entirely a question, however, of our own receptivity to it? Are we willing and ready to receive what we treat about? Are we willing and ready to receive what we affirm and declare? Are we willing and ready to believe it? For those of you who weren't here for the opening pre-service song, Alma said, believe it or not, are we ready to believe it? Because we've been taught, don't. You're not holy, you're not sacred, you're not good enough, you're not something enough. But I'm not even going to say believe it or not, you are. Believe it. You are. You have to be. Spirit is all there is. How could you be anything that is not sacred, holy, divine, good enough? When, here's a circle. Now I want you to imagine the circle without bounds, meaning there is no line to the circle. Now, why would you do that? Because the circle, which we know and understand, or as Voltaire said, God is a circle whose circumference is where? Nowhere. And whose center is everywhere. So right where you are right now, wherever it is that you are, in your bed, in your living room, dining room, in the cabin, wherever your studio, wherever it is that you are, the center of God is. Because there's nowhere that it's not. So it has to be right where you are. That means this circle that has no container is all God, and that means everything within it must be God, because there is no outside of God. So when we talk about the profane that must exist within the scope of God, the mundane must exist within the scope of God. That means the teacher is no less holy of an occupation than the priest, the minister, the nun, the monk. That means there is absolutely nothing that can be less than what God is. The thing that makes that difference is what we are setting in our consciousness as a limitation of it. Because we are the ones that created the holy, the non-holy, and the unholy. Bum, 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 bum. We created that. There was no word from anything, anyone on high, quote unquote, that said, thou must now therefore name this thing as holy and this other thing isn't. Men wrote that. Because even when one reads the Bible, the book of Leviticus, and all of the thou shalt not and don't eat this and don't do this and don't do that, those were written by men who were controlling the communities. So what we're recognizing that it's all God. Our thoughts create the limitations. Michael Bernard Beckwith says, in God awareness, problems dissolve because there are no real problems in God consciousness. In the mind of God, there are only perfect patterns of existence and divine ideas. And what we know in our teaching is that there is one mind, that mind is God. That means the mind any of us is using is the same mind. So if I'm using the mind of God, and the mind of God is perfect patterns of existence and divine ideas, question is, am I limiting those divine ideas and patterns? Am I seeing lack and limitation because I'm choosing, believe it or not, I choose to not. I don't want to believe that I'm as good as you say. I don't want to believe that I can be free of my addictions. I don't want to believe anything that you say about those people or that thing. I don't want to. So then I'm limiting. I'm not being receptive to the infinite power that is all that is. So pause for a second. Because many of us, we know and understand the experience of going to see a physician. And when you go see your physician, one of the things that your physician says is, so what's up? Like, how are you? How are you experiencing your life? Are there aches, pains? You know, there are some people who aren't honest with their physician. They won't tell their physician everything. So your physician is not able to treat you in order to optimize your health and well-being because you are limiting the way you are communicating what's going on, which means the divine right pattern of your own health and well-being cannot be optimized, cannot be demonstrated because your physician, or in our case, the metaphysician, can only operate to the degree of the mental equivalent, which is more than just the thinking. The mental equivalent is the entire way of being present as the very consciousness of. So you go to a practitioner or you go to a minister or you're in your own practice, but you're not being completely honest with yourself. You won't talk about it. You won't bring it into the realm of conversation. You won't talk about things like, well, what's wrong with the world? Because, God forbid, wink, wink, that we actually talk about the situations, the systems in place that are limiting and destroying and traumatizing around the world. God forbid we are honest and open about this. When we say there is nothing that needs to be healed, only truth to be revealed. But if we are so stuck in the realm of lies and illusion that we aren't even willing to stand in the truth, to speak the truth, to move in and as the truth, then how do we ever bring the truth to the situation? We don't. We continue to perpetuate illness, dis-ease, disorder, disharmony, etc., because we're unwilling to stand boldly in an audacious and radical truth, because that's the only way we change and create a world that works for all. So the question is, what truth are we being asked to reveal in order to transform the world? What truth are we being asked to reveal in our own lives? What truth are we being asked to reveal in our communities, individual centers, individual churches, individual cities, states, nations, countries, relationships? What truths are we being asked to reveal? James Baldwin says, I speak of change, not on the surface, but in the depths. Change in the sense of renewal. But renewal becomes impossible if one supposes that things are constant when they are not, such as safety, money, power, because we talk about them as though they are a constant. This is the land of milk and honey. What applies for one applies to all, but we know that's not true. We know that safety is not equal for all. We know that money is not equal for all, because we know we have the wealthy 1% who make more than enough money where billionaires could eradicate poverty and still be billionaires if they contributed. We know that power is not an equal balance, because we know that those wealthy folks hold the power. So if we are going to change, if we are going to renew, if we are going to transform and create a world that works for all, then we can no longer walk or scratch the surface of topics, subjects, or consciousness. It is time to do a deep dive into the truth and the practice. Science of Mind says, we will not refuse to help the helpless or to lift up the fallen, but we will refuse to wallow in the mud because of our sympathies. Oh, I'm sorry that there are homeless people. I'm sorry that they're poor. I'm sorry that Black people are getting killed by the police. I'm sorry that the Palestinians are being eradicated because of genocide. I'm so sorry that women are raped in the country. And I'm so sorry about, stop being sorry about. Stop offering prayers and sympathies when what we can do is radically transform the systems to create a world that actually works for these people. Changing where first cause and then. So first cause, consciousness. We know this. But when we are unwilling to be honest and truthful in our own selves and practice, then I'm clearly going to be dishonest when I'm now in an interaction with Tracy. I can't be honest with myself. I don't want to bare my own soul to me. I don't want to open my closet of skeletons to me. So if I'm not willing to even look at my own skeletons in the closet, there's no way I'm going to even offer Tracy a peek. Matter of fact, I'm going to deny that there's a closet at all. No, Tracy, I'm good. I do my spiritual mind treatments and I meditate. I'm good. I'm walking on clouds. Who could it be? Believe it or not, everything's perfect for just me. Like, is that? No, that doesn't change the world. That doesn't build relationships. When we're not honest with ourselves or honest with our community members, our family members, our loved ones, nothing changes. We are stuck in the quagmire of our simple sympathies rather than changing and evolving beyond them. So let's explore. Which one of these is more spiritual of an activity? What about these? Which one of these is a more spiritual, more divine, or more holy activity? Mopping versus a labyrinth. Washing dishes versus yoga. Well, clearly the yoga is more spiritual. Clearly the labyrinth is more holy. Really? God is all there is. What of these? Gardening versus prayer. Is one more holy, sacred, or divine a practice? Oh, vacuuming versus meditation. One is more sacred and holy than the other. Wait a minute. If God is all there is, Tracy, spirit is all there is, then that means even that activity must be sacred and holy when we are willing to understand it from that degree of consciousness. Everything is holy when we remove the consciousness of lack, limitation, separation. Everything is spirit. Deep in our humanness, spirit. So there is no being human and being spiritual. It's all the same thing when we accept it from that space, when we are receptive from that space. So many of you may not know, Lil Nas did a video recently where he was lap dancing the devil and people lost their minds. It's blasphemous. How dare he? It's inviting the devil into the lives of our children and stuff. What is blasphemous? You know, for me, blasphemy is when we are denying our divinity, the innate power of our divinity. But even that blasphemy, even that must be holy when I remove my limitations about the consciousness. Because ultimately, there is nothing that is not God. There is nothing that is separate from God. So when I recognize that, then all doors swing open. Reverend Leslie Goodwin shared on Facebook, I think it was today, that if you want some really good vegan recipes, the Satanic Temple is offering vegan recipes and they're good. And there are many people who are like, who's offering what? No, it's all God. All paths lead to. They have to, because the path itself is God. Jeff Brown in the book Grounded Spirituality said, the real question for me was no longer, what is spirituality? The real question was, what does it mean to be truly human? really, truly, fully, authentically, genuinely, and comprehensively human. Because there is no more rising above, because there is no above to rise to. It's all God. We talk about spiraling up, yes, for linguistic convenience, but there is no real up to go to. Follow what I'm saying? There is no up or down, heaven or hell. There is only right here, to the degree that our consciousness recognizes and understands. What does our Declaration of Principles say? We believe that heaven is within and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. There's nowhere to go. It's right here. And as Fred Rogers says, anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, fears, worries, anxieties, all of that stuff that we bypass and push aside, when we can talk about all of that, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, less scary, and I add less powerful over us. The people we trust with that important talk can help us to know that we are not alone, and we are never alone. So let's go back and ask the question, what's wrong with the world? What truth are we being invited to reveal? What truth are we being invited to step into? David R. Hawkins says, in this interconnected universe, every improvement we make in our private world improves the world at large for everyone. Pause. Why would that be? There is one life, that life is God. That life is my life now. That life is Tracy's life now. That life is your life now. So when you change, when you improve the world, when you shift your consciousness, it affects all, because there is only the all. Let's go. Simple kindness to oneself and all that lives is the most powerful transformational force of all. A simple kindness to a butterfly, to a blade of grass, to a caterpillar. A simple kindness to a stranger, a simple kindness to yourself is powerfully transformational for all of creation. Recognizing that there are many things in the world that we are invited to shift, to know the truth about. There are many things in the world that we are invited to know the truth about, to shift consciousness around, to elevate, once again, for linguistic convenience, to elevate, to rise up in our consciousness, to create the mental equivalent that says these ways of being are no longer needed, necessary, or wanted. The systems that created them are no longer needed, necessary, or wanted because we are shifting our state of being. We are shifting how we are showing up. We understand and we recognize. Starts in consciousness, thought, word, feeling, and deed. How do we act when we know the truth? How do we show up in action when we know the truth? What are we called to do when we know the truth? Thinking it is one thing. Having a conversation about it is one thing. Feeling so much emotion about it is one thing. But putting that faith into action is a completely different thing. Treat and move your feet. Holmes didn't say, just pray. Prayer is all that's needed. Treat and move your feet. Faith without works. Doesn't say faith without thinking. Faith without action, faith without works is dead. We don't change anything when we let the systems that be continue to be oppressive. When we let the systems, the old guard that created the systems of consciousness that exist around the planet in mass consciousness that are causing hurt, harm, trauma, death, destruction, genocide, poverty, hunger, war, and rumors of war that create more war, destitute, disease, famine. All of these things can be changed right here and right now. First, where? In our consciousness. Are we willing to remove the barriers, the limitations in our consciousness? Because many of us are going to say, but Reverend Ray, colonization has always existed in one place or another. Once they stepped in, we can end that paradigm that created colonization in the first place. But hunger, there will always be hungry people. But does there have to be? The concept of, but what it's always been is what it must always be, that's lack and limitation. That's limiting your divinity by saying what cannot be, rather than, I will speak a thing that is not at this moment. I will speak about it as though it were, and I will step into truth and make it answered prayer. That's our invitation. Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson, oh, that's me, says, in order to experience a world that works for all, individually and collectively, we are invited and required to do a deep, explorative, transformative, and restorative, the practices of ASL. Wow. That's what happens when you get caught in the moment. Because for a moment there, I just envisioned Faith signing what I'm, sorry. Do the deep explorative, transformative, and restorative practices of science of mind and spirit. That's how we create a world that works for all. Do the work. The work, the process, the practice is the only way to evolve beyond the mass consciousness of systemic oppression, systemic trauma, and systemic destruction. The work, the process, and the practice, moment by moment, thought by thought, word by word, feeling by feeling, deed by deed, breath by breath. Do the work, engage the process, do the practice. We already know, we have the teaching. And it's not like this is the only teaching that will do it. We're talking about our teaching though. Science of mind and spirit. We know that it works, then it's time to work it. As Tracy said, prayer works. And we often say, yeah, it does work if you work it. If you do the steps, not if you think the steps and only think. I would think a thought I've never thought before. And then I'd get up off the floor. It's time to act, get up, rise up, pick up thy pallet and walk. Do the work. This too is God. The more you practice, the better you get. Okay, if we're going to say that, then what's the practice for this week, Reverend Ray? Journal or have a conversation about what are the things in my life that I have been taught and might still believe are less spiritual? Are there things that even in my life right now that I would label and call, that's not quite as spiritual? Cursing, using bad language, that's not spiritual. Who the said that?
According to what went on in the chat, it is spiritual.
Dun, 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 dun. That's what I'm talking about. So, but seriously, because if I'm still limiting, if I'm still believing that something is less spiritual, then I'm limiting my ability to stand in the truth and move and live and have my beingness from that space. Is sex less spiritual? Is feeling anger less spiritual? Is dancing and going to the club less spiritual? For some, that's what we were taught. What Tracy said, make it rain. Okay, number two. Some would say laughing in service is less spiritual. It's church. You don't laugh in church. You do when Reverend Ray's the minister. Where is one place this week that I can embody and be a human being? Yeah, it's an acronym yet again. Human being, a holy or holy, unified metaphysician of awareness now. Where can I be that? Where can I embody being a holy, unified metaphysician of awareness now? Where can I embody that? Where can I step into that truth and live from that space? And then lastly, have a conversation with tres personas about this passage from Grounded Spirituality. Spirit abounds. It is everywhere. It is all God or divinity or sacredness or whatever you choose to call it. Think of it as the path of entirety. With great reverence for everything, you welcome everything into consciousness. Nothing real gets thrown out. Everything comes along for the ride. Everything. Because we are now inviting the full power of divinity. Today's declaration for this week, I will say it first, and then together we will affirm it and declare it. I communicate clearly and openly about all aspects of God. Together, I communicate clearly and openly about all aspects of God. But let us close out recognizing the infinite goodness that is God present right here, right now, in this breath. My breath, your breath, all breath is God breathing itself. And knowing that this divine power presence purposefully is showing up in thought, in word, in feeling, in deed, to be sizzling right here in this life, demonstrating this life, joy, this life, orgasmic wonderment, this life, right here, right now. So we end service, but we continue to be in service to one another. We continue to be in service to all of the world in how we show up, serving with love, compassion, joy, power, purpose, and all of the things that are ours to give, ours to live, ours to be. So knowing that this treatment is done, knowing that this service is done, knowing that each and every one of us is that power and presence as we go out through the rest of our day, doing so magnificently. I know this prayer is done. I know this treatment is answered. I know, and so I surrendered and let it be what it is. And together we say, and so it is, Ashe, Amen, and Aho. Blessings, everyone. Love you.